Hello everyone, this is FoxyPapaSmurf for FPS Gamer for short, and today we are looking at the Xbox One Elite controller. And this thing's been out for over a year now, so is it still worth it? At $150 US, it's understandably a hard pill to swallow for those that don't really understand the appeal of high-end peripherals. Now, for those of us in the PC gaming community, obviously we can sympathize with the desire to have the most top-of-the-line peripherals. After all, if you have a high-end gaming machine, it would make sense that eventually, if your machine is fast enough, the slowest part of your workflow is you. And for a lot of people, it makes a big difference to have peripherals that are fast, responsive, and have a lot of functionality. Well, the same can be said for Xbox now as well. For a long time before this Elite controller came out, the Xbox and PlayStation community had to resort to third parties if they wanted really high-end peripherals that were faster and had more functionality than the ones that came out of the box with their systems. Microsoft obviously saw the desire was there. There was a market to create their own first-party controller. Now, a few people got a little bit disheartened, including myself, to find out that this thing costs $150. But a lot of things have changed in the years since this controller debuted. A lot of the features, the convenience functionality that exists in this controller can now be found in their out-of-the-box controllers that you find on retail shelves or out of the box with your system. So $150, if it seemed steep a year ago, seems especially expensive now. I managed to get my hands on this controller for $99, and I've seen numerous places having similar sales. Now at this new price point, it's easier to understand, and you may still be a little bit skeptical spending $100 on a controller, thinking maybe that's not really worth it. Let's talk about some of the features and maybe I can persuade you, because I really like this thing. First, let's talk about the aesthetics. The controller, as you can see, is all black. It has this matte black finish, blacked out buttons with silver and very minute green accents that can be found on the wireless connection button, on the trigger stop switches, the actuation buttons on the rear of the controller, and also in some of the negative space around the controller, like behind the D-pad. I think it looks fantastic, and it also has this nice textured, rubberized grip right where your fingers lay. Honestly, going back to just an all-plastic controller definitely feels much less premium after holding one of these, and also weighs a lot. For some people, you may not like that, but I actually really like that. It feels very premium, and I'll get into why that is in just a moment. Even if you're not a Doritos-eating, Mountain Dew-drinking MLG player, I think you could still appreciate a lot of the functionality that exists with this controller. So let's talk about some of those features. First and foremost, we have the paddles on the rear of the controller, which for most people, this is going to be the #1 reason for buying this controller. Now, traditionally, when you're playing with a controller, your thumbs have to remain on the thumbsticks unless you need to press another button. And that moment where you have to leave the thumbstick leaves you a little bit vulnerable. Now, for the vast majority of people, the amount of time it takes to go from the thumbstick to a button and return is probably negligible. But for others out there, every millisecond counts, and having every button have its own dedicated finger is able to cut down on the amount of time it takes in order to perform a specific action. Now, another small time-saving measure are the inclusion of these trigger stops. These small green switches on the rear of the controller allow the player to enable and disable trigger stops. Now, this ability to turn these on or off, at least when this came out, wasn't really done by anyone in the mainstream market. So that's a really cool feature to have. Now, by enabling this trigger stop, you reduce the amount of travel time it takes to actuate this trigger. Now, for games like shooters or any game where you're going to be repeatedly tapping the trigger, and it doesn't matter how far down you go on the trigger, this is a great inclusion. Now, for games like Forza or other racing games where you need precise control of exactly how much pressure you're putting on that trigger, you obviously are going to want to disable it, which can be performed with the click of a switch. The thumbsticks also saw a great improvement. The side of the thumbsticks, which are all removable by the way, are metal, and the inner ring where the thumbstick is housed is also solid metal. So when you press the thumbstick to the edge of the circle and rotate it around, it's extremely smooth, very, very smooth. It's almost like you need to recalibrate how much pressure you put on the thumbstick once it reaches the edge of that inner circle, which is really nice. They're also very firm, and this could be really due to the fact that my controller is now, 2.5 years old now, so the thumbsticks could just be worn. And so I'm just used to playing with kind of loose thumbsticks. But these are extremely snappy. They pop right back into place. No wiggle in the center at all. They feel very premium. And as I mentioned, they do come off. They're all magnetic, which is why the controller has a lot of metal components inside of it. So you can actually swap these out with a variety of other thumbsticks. There are the traditional shallow concave thumbsticks. There are the slightly taller convex thumbsticks, and also these very tall concave thumbsticks, which allow for greater precision, but out of anything, they take the most getting used to. The D-pad also is incredible. It has the satellite dish, disco ball looking D-pad, which for most games doesn't really make a difference. It can be used with this or a traditional D-pad, which is also metallic and magnetized so it sits in place and doesn't move around. It's also very clicky. I like that a lot. As a matter of fact, the whole thing is very tactile, gives a lot of feedback. Again, this could just be the fact that this is a new controller, and any new controller would feel very responsive and very clicky to me. Now for one of my personal favorite features on this controller, which is the inclusion of profiles. So you can remap it, so A can be B, Y can be X. Basically any button on here can be a different button, which is really, really cool. Now the profiles are extremely nice. You can go into on a PC or even on the Xbox, you have access to the application where you can modify these settings. You can also change how much actuation is needed, how much pressure is needed to actuate the triggers. So for example, if you have these trigger stops engaged on Halo, I found that you can fire your gun just fine, but if you go to charge a weapon like a plasma pistol, it doesn't go down far enough to actually activate that charging animation. So what you need to do is go into the settings and change the amount of force you need from 0 to 100 to something like 5 and 20. So 5 is your new 0, 20 is your new 100, and only a little bit of force is needed to get that entire actuation, which for a first-person shooter is extremely helpful. Now in a game like Forza, you're going to want the full travel, and so what you can do is set Profile 1 as Halo and Profile 2 as Forza, and you save those onto the controller itself. They're saved on here. And you can have 2 profiles on here at a time. You can have almost an unlimited number saved on your computer, and anytime plug in your controller to your computer or to your console and put whatever profiles you want on the controller. Then you take your controller to your friend's house or wherever you want, and those settings are saved on here. So if you're still seeing this around for $150, I would wait, especially since some of these convenience features like remapping the buttons and things like that can actually now be found implemented onto the newer controllers, and the inclusion of a 3.5mm jack, which was pretty cool at the time, can be seen on every single controller that's been out really in the last year. So if you're looking for some of those convenience features but don't want to blow $150, I would stick to Microsoft's own controllers that come out of the package. But if you are looking for some of the more performance-oriented features of this controller, you can easily find this controller for less than 120 bucks, sometimes less than $100, and at that price I highly recommend it. But thank you guys so much for watching. Go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you appreciated it. Comment down below on whether or not you think this controller is worth the extra money, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.